program that is rebroadcast on Channel 7 at around 6 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. It is, as you know, a discussion program in which we attempt to feature topical issues affecting our country, whether directly or indirectly. And before I start this evening, and before I introduce my guest, I want to draw attention to a newspaper article in the New York Times about a week ago that has generated a lot of heat and very little light. The article was written on the Exxon Mobil fines, and it assumed a style, semi-humor, semi-sarcasm, but essentially it set the background for the country that will soon become a major oil producer. The author of the article probably, and more than likely, or for many, overdid it and caused a lot of uproar. Nobody so far has been able to say exactly what was factually incorrect with the article, other than to say the condescending style of the writer, and I think there is a point in that, but I tend to think that substance means so much more rather than form. What bothers me is that many of these people who are so concerned about the style of an article that has maybe a life of a few days, everyone is going to forget an article written in the New York Times, is prepared to ignore a contract that is so lopsided that insults Guyana by its very nature, and that holds this country essentially bound, its laws and everything else, for the next several decades. I wish the persons who have so strongly and vehemently and profusely aired their views in the letter columns of the newspapers and on social media would consider the appropriateness of that contract. And I ask them, why is it they do not think it necessary to comment on some of the injustices and the inequity in the contract? And I just want to say this, for those of us who think that, oh, we are new to this, we are new in negotiations. No, we have some very talented lawyers in the government. We have talented lawyers in the country. We also have some excellent examples, not from rich people country, not from white people country, but go to Botswana and its contract with the De Beers for the mining of diamond. Go to Uganda and you see recent example of what a properly negotiated petroleum contract ought to look like. I really invite those who so vehemently castigated the journalists and the New York Times for the article to do just a little bit of reading and research. Having said that, let me invite or introduce my guest, politician, a budding politician, who has very courageously decided to step out and enter the political arena, where he feels that he and his party can make a contribution to the future of our country. You may have read his many letters in the letter columns of the newspapers. He's Mr. Craig Sylvester, party leader and presidential candidate, Democratic National Congress. Mr. Sylvester, thank you very much for appearing on Blade Dog.
Well, I must thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And I want to start by extending to you congratulations for having the courage to put yourself where your mouth is. It's a courageous move. We'll get into the whys and hows later on. But I just want to extend to you congratulations on the courage you have demonstrated. It's no easy task. You're assuming. I trust you understand and appreciate that.
Yes, I do. And I must thank you very much, and I hope that Ghanaians follow me, because we have some challenges ahead that will require a lot of courage.
Now, what is striking about this, and we have a good about another 50 minutes we will be talking. What is striking about this booklet? It's not a manifesto yet. It's
essentially a brochure.
It's a brochure
to our party.
Yes,
that's correct.
What is interesting, and as we look on the banner we've got as a backdrop to this table, we see you have a photograph of the late Cheddi Jagan, President Cheddi Jagan, and a photograph of the late President Desmond Hoyte. Why this selection of these two persons?
Yeah, well, you see, Chris, it's pretty straightforward. These two individuals, to me, I think represent what Guyana is all about, and what Guyanese should look at in terms of where we should be going, right? Cheddi Jagan, on one hand, okay, he actually stood up, right, courageously for 28 years against the PNC's government, against all of the rigged elections, right, against the death of some of his supporters, right, through all the struggles that the people of Guyana went through, right, while the PNC was in power, right, and ultimately, right, he was able to be there at the end, right, when democracy was actually finally handed back over to Guyana by Desmond Hoyte, right, who is there also on the banner, right. Now, Desmond Hoyte's position, right, is to me, right, I know as formal, it's my opinion actually that I think he is the father of our modern economy, because he, I think with Dr. Kenneth King, right, was able to negotiate with the fund, right, and other multilateral agencies out of the scenario that we had gotten into under Burnham's policy of nationalization and socialism, right? So these two individuals, to me, stand as clear leaders, statesmen for Guyanese to look at, right? And this is something I want us to focus on, because this is what we, the Democratic National Congress, are looking to deliver to Guyana, right? Statesman-like leadership and good government, which Hoyte adumbrated.
Now, Mr. Sylvester, you've chosen two leaders, but they're both in some ways paradoxes and contradictions. Cheddi Jagan was an extreme left wing. He was a Marxist-Leninist. Yeah. Desmond Hoyte, we are not quite sure at early stages. He supported all the policies of Forbes Burnham, yeah. And then it was only in the latter stage, yes, when reality confronted him, that he made almost an about turn. Yeah. So how do you explain the choices in the context of their contradictions?
That is very, very correct, right? Because I am as an economist, I am just against socialism because socialism is destructive in itself, right? But these leaders, right, to me, right, beckon to both, to the supporters of both the parties we are challenging, right? Jagan, for all of his, shall we say, deficiencies in terms of economic management, where he actually embraces socialism, right, is actually, without a doubt, the leader of the PPP, right? Hoyte also is recognized as a leader and a statesman within the traditional PNC base, right? So with these two leaders, I'm looking forward actually to support from both parties, because what we actually have right here, right now, that is unfolding, which we will get into summary later on, right, is something of emergency without trying to make it overblown. Yeah? So, without a doubt, I must agree with you, but I think it's pretty clear why they're here on our party's banner.
Now, you give Desmond Hoyte credit for the return of democracy in 1992. You also give him credit for the reversal of the socialist policies of a government of which he had long been a part.
Yes, that is correct.
Now, you had Carl Greenidge was the one, to the best of my knowledge, who did a lot of the negotiations with the multilateral financial institutions, who got the HIPIC funding. Now, Greenidge may not be a finance minister in this government, but he's a senior member of cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
So what's wrong with this government, the Granger administration, with the skills of Carl Greenidge? Since you admire Hoyte's economic policies,
mm-hmm.
and they go largely, partly the architect
mm-hmm.
and the executor of it was Greenidge.
Uh-huh.
So why not give this administration credit for that?
Well, you know, Chris, this comes back to the problem that I mentioned earlier, right? The Granger administration has actually, we are aware that the Granger administration has deviated much from its path that it was set with this manifesto going into the 2015 elections. All right? It has upset its own supporters. The Granger administration has upset the PPP supporters also, right? To my mind, the Granger administration has put itself in a castle, and it has surrounded itself by its people, and all of them are clamoring against the Granger administration, right? The Granger administration has actually put itself in an embattled position, out of which, to my mind, it cannot come out of, right? Going into this would probably take up a lot of what we will be talking about later on, but some of it is the Granger administration, or even Greenidge with the Granger administration, is not anything I would have anything positive to say about at this point in time, unfortunately.
Now, you must have been observing and certainly would have read and analyzed political developments, electioneering, election results. We have a peculiar electorate. People who vote against their own self-interest simply because they vote purely on the basis of race. How do you, and we know in the period between elections, people say all kinds of things.
That is true.
How do you know that these people are not going to just go back to the tent?
Yeah. That's a fair question. I thought about all of that when I established my party, right? But I'll tell you this, right? what I want to get into is the reasons the PPP supporters vote for the PPP and the APNU supporters vote for.
Is that a secret?
Huh?
Isn't it because
I don't want to discuss it. If you'd like me to discuss it,
as
I
a
can
political
discuss it.
leader, you got to discuss them.
Quite frankly, what I see, right, is that the PPP supporters have actually the Granger administration have actually justified the phrase of the PPP supporters of them, right? I say this because of how the PPP supporters, particularly the sugar workers, have been treated by the Granger administration. I am very unhappy about it, and I think the sugar workers are very unhappy about it. I think all Guyanese know, right, that the Granger administration could have done much better in dealing with the retrenchment of the sugar workers.
When you say could have done better, how could they have done better?
Well, looking at what unfolded, right, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, right, they had budgeted just $500 million, okay, to satisfy the retrenchment requirements of of 4,700 workers, right? Ultimately, they actually released, I think it's $4 billion in total.
That's good, yeah, something around that.
Right? So what that says off the bat, right, is that they never prepared a serious financial proposal for dealing with the retrenchment of these Indian sugar workers, and had, these sugar workers, and had the GAU not made proper representation, it is very possible that these sugar workers would have just received this $500 million, and we know what goes on right now, right? They received $2 billion in January. They received recently, I think, another $2 billion, right? The problem with that, right, is when that $2 billion is finished, or this $4 billion that they've received complete is finished, or is on the way to being used up by the year end, what will happen to those workers who have not found jobs? Now, this is a problem I think we need to consider, and it's something that we really should look at.
Do you see it, Mr. Sylvester, as an issue of short-sightedness and incompetence, or political retribution and spite?
Well, I must say that prior to the election, prior to what has been happening in the Granger administration, that I had some amount of respect for the capacities of Mr. Winston Jordan, right? And I should probably say that I still do, right? Because what I have a strong feeling of is that the policy of this government is not anywhere directed by anything that is done at the Ministry of Finance. Policy of this government is spread out and set forward by the individuals in Congress placed, right? So the issue of incompetence as such is not something that I would consider. This, I think, is just a deliberate ploy by the administration, because they do not expect ever to get any support from sugar workers, to just treat them give them as little as possible and let them go on their way, without consideration for the human aspect of the lives and the children of these sugar workers. So ultimately, I think it was politically motivated, and I was very unhappy about it, because to my mind, I played a significant role in getting the coalition into power, right? And I made it very clear, and I think that's answers your question.
Now, we go back to the two gentlemen. Hoyte is often not mentioned, even though he's the most recent president of the PNC. He hardly gets the kind of credit within his own party, in my view. Cheddi Jagan still does.
Mm-hmm.
So if these are the two people you admire, why not support the party that embraces either of them? In other words, why aren't you supporting the PPP, which is Cheddi Jagan's party? To put it in popular
Yeah,
parlance.
well, you know, Chris, you know, you and I we consume the literature in the newspapers, and we understand a lot of what is going on in the news and in our politics, right? And I think you've read many of my letters also, right? And I say this on national television. I will never ever support the PPP, the People's Progressive Party, under the current executive, which I don't think will ever change in the next 5 to 10 years, right? And my reasons for that are pretty straightforward, right? Other than the fact that we know that they use corruption as part of their government, which is pretty clear and straightforward, you know, national media, right? The PPP has been in league with, right, drug lords, drug runners. They've facilitated money laundering. They've, I think, committed resources, right, into the hands of criminals, right? And these criminals have actually used these resources to hunt and gun down individuals. Now, this is not news. What I'm saying is not news. What I'm saying is in the newspapers and Starbuck News, right? So I can never ever, right, support the PPP because it is my opinion that they exercise terrorism or some form of terror on the Guyanese public, right? And the Guyanese themselves kind of test for it from Georgetown and in Region 4.
Given that you're saying that that's a matter of a well-known fact.
It's common knowledge.
Good, common knowledge. We have Soku,
Yeah.
serious offenses. We have Sarah. Why are these two entities that have some intellectual capacity and some financial resources, why have they not been able to bring these people to justice as yet?
Well, Sarah would tell you and Soko would tell you that meting out justice against the individuals who were involved in corruption during the PPP's time is a lengthy exercise, and I will not argue with them on that, right?
But 3 years, you don't think 3 years is more than long enough?
You're a liar. I'm not. Right?
No.
I can't argue with.
Unfortunately, I'm the one asking the questions tonight.
Yeah, well, there you go. All right, I honestly can't have a proper answer on that. But what I do know is that the history of or I should say the experience of justice against such individuals in Guyana has been not very productive for the public, right? I wouldn't get into individual cases because this can bring up the people and their families, all right, into the public eye again. But the most I can say is that I do not expect, honestly, any serious outcome from the cases. If there is, I'd be happy. But I don't expect any serious outcomes in terms of justice and recovery of assets.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it because you think the allegations don't have sufficient basis? Is it because the investigative capacity of Soku, Sarah, and the police force is inadequate? Or that you don't have confidence in the justice system?
Well, what I can say, Chris, is again, it's public knowledge that the justice system is very susceptible to corruption. Okay?
You're not accusing the judiciary of corruption?
Well, maybe not the, well, I can't say, but what I do know is that there.
Because that would be a very serious allegation, particularly from a political leader to be making.
Let me put, I say it again, right? The justice system, right, is susceptible. Individuals who are engaged in looking after cases and this kind of stuff are susceptible to corruption, and it's been known. It's been known.
I want you to clarify that. You're not suggesting judges are you?
Well, I have no evidence to the extent that judges have actually been taking bribes in where decisions are concerned. But what I do know, right, and it has been shown in the newspapers, that a number of cases have had to be thrown out for flimsy issues, okay? Lost documents, you know.
But that's not because of the judges.
Yeah, well, you see,
that's
this is it. I'm not.
That's why I'm trying to get clarification from you.
I might be incorrect, but my perspective on the judicial system is that it includes all of the law clerks and the clerks and everybody involved in the preparation.
You're talking some of the executive
material, the preparation of the material to go to court, right? This is what is at bay.
Now, you launch your party, the Democratic National Congress, on May 23rd, 2018. And one of the points you made, today will finally mark the day in our history when we set aside the politics of race, which has divided us as a nation, and unite under a set of tested policies which have advanced the welfare of the developed nations. Are you being excessively optimistic in suggesting that we have set aside the politics of race in this country?
No, we will set aside the politics of race. Let me tell you why, right? Guyana right now is at that point where it can very easily slip back into the past of mismanagement, or with us, it can examine our policies and vote for us to take us, Guyanese, into a better life, into the new era that we know is possible. Okay, so when Guyanese examine our document, they examine the policies that we are offering that can guide us out of where we are and into a better life, the real life, not a good life. All right? I am looking for support from both the PPP supporters and the coalition to break the gridlock that we've been experiencing for the last 44 to 47 years under both the PNC for the 24 years from 1968 to 92, and for the 23 years of the PPP from the 1992 to 2015. We've had enough of that. We've had enough of economic mismanagement. We've had enough of corruption. We've had enough of money laundering. We've had enough of narcotics being transshipped through our borders. We've had enough of all of that. We've had enough of underpaid workers, right? We've had enough of the private sector being marginalized. I am an economist, right? I've worked at the Bank of Ghana for 8 years. I've also done some examination of countries, and I have developed these set of policies. I think we can look at it, let us examine it, and we can make a decision on this, or alternatively, we can turn to the PPP or the PNC. But what I would like to say is that my motto, or our motto, the Democratic Congress, the motto of the Democratic National Congress is this, is that a nation that fails to defend its democracy consents to and justifies the abuses of its government. So if you go back to the PPP, you cannot complain about anything that the PPP does to you. If you vote again for the coalition, you cannot again complain for what the coalition does.
But
it's that clear.
It sounds clear indeed.
Well, thank you very much.
But
you're getting back to the race vote?
No, I'm not getting back to that at all. Okay. We've gone past that.
Okay.
But the persons who have to make a decision also have to make a decision. Not only what are my options, but what are my viable options? We've had, and this is not to disparage anyone, we've had every elections. We've got political parties come up. Some of them manage to stick around. But they don't seem viable.
They don't survive.
Yes, they
Most
don't
of them.
survive. And therefore, a voter who may very well say, look, you know, both of these guys are bad. But you know what? They're the only options we have. So what I now have to do is choose the lesser of two evils.
Right.
What do you say to those persons who go through that mental process to arrive at such a position?
Yeah, well, I understand your position, right? And I understand the position of Guyanese who are not familiar with managing a country and this kind of stuff. But what I am confident is that my proposals or the proposals of the Democratic National Congress will win the support of our intelligence community, and it is our intelligence community which will staff our party, and it is the intelligence community which will guide the masses of Guyanese to us to bring in the votes to win the 2020 elections. In 2015, a total of 409,000 votes were cast and counted as valid. Right? We are looking for just about half of those votes. And I can tell you that based on the climate that Guyanese have gone through for the last 20 to 30, 40 years, right? They know for themselves that they need a change. They, however, just need to change to something that they can feel sure and secure about. Right? And this is what I am offering to them. In particularly, what I can say now, as the time has come for me to say this, right, is that I can safely say that even though I am looking for support from both parties, I say that we, the Democratic National Congress, cannot go forward. The country cannot go forward without the support of the traditional PPP supporters. These PPP supporters are pivotal, and our success hinges on them.
You know, as you speak, Mr. Sylvester, I think of the early days of the Alliance for Change. When they started, Sheila Holder had sat in the National Assembly under the banner of the Working People's Alliance. Raphael Trotman under the PNCR, Kemraj Ramjatan under the PPPC. They were seasoned politicians. They had some kind of constituency. They joined together with support from the media, because and maybe the international community. There was a lot of push, and yet they did not break that barrier. They did not. The walls of the PPP and the PNC did not collapse, despite the bugling by the AFC.
Yeah.
Why do you think you will be different?
Well, I'll say it again, right? The difference between my party and the other parties that went before is that my party, I am confident that my party has a comprehensive plan, a comprehensive set of ideas, a comprehensive set of economic policies that can appeal to our intelligence community, and they will see that what our party is offering can actually work, and it will deliver on the promises that are set forward. Right? This is the difference. We are offering higher wages for our workers. We are offering a negotiating table to our private sector. We are offering reduced unemployment. Right? We are offering a repeal of VAT and all those those heavy those items, a repeal on those items, the basic items that were taxed. We are offering a reduction in the tax rates for telecommunications companies and retail/commercial organizations, right, from 45 and 40% respectively down to 30%. Right? These are some of the policies we are offering. We are offering to introduce unemployment, which I know, I'm quite certain will be needed at the end of 2018 for the many sugar workers who still are unemployed, right? So these are just a couple of the policies we are offering. Again, we are still in the advertising mode, getting our ideas out. We just started 2 months, 3 months, right? Our parties haven't reached the corners of Guyana yet, but we are now getting there. And I must thank you very much for affording
Not
me
at all. That's what
the opportunity.
That's what this program is about. And my asking you these questions is intended to bring out your own policies, programs, capacity,
Yes.
the realism of what you do. It's not to criticize at all. But I keep making this point
Mhm.
that history is not on your side.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. The PPP didn't think that they would lose the elections in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
But coming into the final months, they began to lose faith. They began to question. All right? They did lose. And you know why they lost? Because many PPP supporters had come to understand that the PPP was engaged in much corruption and it was engaged in a lot of abuse of
Mhm.
Guyanese.
Well,
Now, Indian supporters broke away from the PPP just to give Guyana a chance, right? The African supporters, the PNC supporters broke away from the PNC to give the PPP a chance in 1992. These two groups of people, right, when they have had enough of either party, will throw their support behind the party that is out of power. Right now, we have had 24, 28 years of the PNC, we've had 23 years of the PPP, and we're having another continuation, it seems, of the PNC right now. I think the Guyanese have just about had it. The youth in Guyana need a chance. Freddie Kissoon was writing about an individual who had 10 tools or something like that, who was working in the bargaining goods, right? Guyanese need a chance. And we, I think, I'm sure, will give them a chance once they get to understand our plan.
I keep restating that in free and fair elections, the support for the major parties has not really deviated by more than a few percentage points.
Mhm.
Let's recall that despite all the unpopularity
Of the both parties.
of the PNC after the failure, the collapse of the socialist programs.
Yeah.
Yes, Desmond Hoyte did some redemption work. That party did not lose that traditional base, and if you were to examine elections from 1957
Mhm.
to now, and you remove those where the elections were clearly rigged,
Mhm.
you see that the major parties, the support from them for them has not fallen off significantly.
Yeah. Well, I understand what you're saying, right? Usually you're asking me is to consider the possibility of my party losing, which I haven't done so as yet, right? Let me put it to you this way. As I said before, right? If you vote for the PPP, don't complain about what the PPP does to you. If you vote for the coalition, do not complain for what the coalition does to you at 2020, because you cannot say that we did not have an option or a chance at another party which is offering you everything virtually that you were asking for. You were asking for higher incomes, we're giving it to you. You were asking for investment, we're giving it to you through negotiation with our private sector. All right?
Mhm.
You're asking for a lot of things, we're willing to give it to you. All right?
What is your plan B? That you conceive, you consider yourself, and optimistically you shouldn't go into something if you don't think you have a good chance.
Yeah,
but you also have to consider that you will fail, that you may not, that you may not achieve the ultimate target. What's your plan B?
Well,
Let's just say
I think
you're
that's-
saying that you're
that's-
going for
that's-
majority. Let's say you don't get it. What happens?
That's
Where
part
would
of
you
the
stand?
That's part of the business model, you know. Our party. Let me restate that our party is looking to form a full government. I don't want to win. I myself am not interested in a seat or two in Parliament. We are looking for full government. We do not believe that we can offer the change that is needed, right, with just one or two seats. I am not interested in one or two seats, right?
So what if you get one or two seats?
Well, it would still be a repetition of what went on in the past, because what we would still have, Chris, right, is a constitution where the executive, the president, right, is granted immunity, right, from prosecution or prosecution by the courts, right? We would still have
only during the currency of his presidency.
during the currency of his presidency,
Yes.
right?
And there's logic for that.
but
That
the-
you don't want everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry. We can bring private criminal charge. People going and these
No, no,
flimsy
no, but-
charges.
No, but
You don't want your president to be.
Let me put it to you this way: a president should not be anywhere close during his term of presidency, right, to any illegal activities or any activities that would run counter to the laws of the country, right? And I think it is clear to you, right, that Bonham, or I think Bonham is the one. Let me just say that Bonham is the one who actually brought this constitutional this article in the Constitution, right? And
Well, he brought the entire 1980 Constitution.
yeah, and at least to my mind, he did that with a clear purpose, right? I don't think that Constitution, as it is, served the best interest of this country. As it is, that very same clause, to me, represents a risk, a risk for investors considering investment in this country. Because if, let's say for example, Exxon, they invest billions and billions of dollars, right? And some lunatic gets into the office of the president, and they start to run hiatus on the country, right? What we will have is a dictatorship ultimately, where a president is he's lunatic and he's just engaging in all kinds of crazy activities. You know, this is the worst case scenario that can actually unfold. We have had some experience of presidents, right, getting or seemingly to have gotten involved in kinds of stuff like this in the past, right? So if I get 2 or 3 seats, right, we would not be able to change the Constitution, and this is one of the primary issues that I'm raising, right?
But you, as
With
the
Guyanese.
as the AFC showed, you can help to bring down a government. If a government chooses
That's
to
correct.
pursue a blinkered path and not to take advice and not to take on board the contribution
That's happened
that
in-
other parties can make,
Yeah.
then that's election time. But you know, I didn't want to ask you about the oil contract, the ExxonMobil contract. You have raised it. Tell me, what is your position on that contract? And let us assume you were to get influence in government. What would you do about that contract?
Chris, I think as it still stands, the contract has for Exxon, I think it's about 600 blocks, They still have 600 blocks.
They have a large number of blocks,
This was
far
in-
more
this-
than the law requires.
This was in excess of what the law had
No,
granted.
absolutely.
Right? That, in addition to all of the faults which are identified, which makes the contracts wholly lopsided, even by your own opinion, right? And not comparable with what is available internationally, all right? That gives the Democratic National Congress cause for a review of that contract, and that's all I can say.
Okay,
on
thank
this
you,
point, right?
thank you. I wanted to get your position.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk. We've got about 12 minutes more for the program. You see how time flies.
Yes, without a doubt.
You have a 14-point agenda for the first 100 days. Constitution of Guyana. What is it you think is wrong with our constitution? Identify 2 or 3 of the major things that you would want to see change,
Yeah.
whether in government or out of government, but ought to be changed for if Guyana is to embark on a path of economic and social prosperity.
Fortunately, I was educated about one more, right? In addition to the issue of the president having immunity from the courts, right? There is the issue of parties, political parties, combining after elections.
So post-elections coalition.
Post-elections coalition. That is one issue that I think Guyanese should have an option to in any democratic society.
Mm-hmm.
Just those 2 for now. Unfortunately, I'm not too much into the constitutional issues, but I know for a start that is what we will look at. I did say, right, that we would we would establish a constitution commission which would investigate or look into all of the issues related to the Constitution, and we would address them in a systematic manner. But just those 2 I can identify for you as issues of
All right.
importance.
And that's a fair and that's an honest answer. You then, your second point is public servants' wages and salaries. And according to you, the wages have taken a drubbing for in excess of 2 decades and will be brought to the front burner immediately. That's not quite a commitment that that's not tangible enough. Moving it, I know what you mean, prioritizing it.
Yeah.
But with what in mind?
Well, I think it was spelled out there, right?
All you said, it will be brought to the front burner immediately.
Yeah.
And the union leaders can look forward to making proposals on public service salaries.
Yeah. Well,
That's all you say. You're not saying what
I think
ought to be given
yeah.
to these
Yeah.
public servants who have taken this
Somewhat,
drubbing.
yeah. What I spelled out, if
It's
not
on
in-
page 5, yeah.
If not in here, what I spelled out, most definitely on Facebook, right, is that our party would I'm sure it's in here, but our party very simply would negotiate with our unions to identify what we call a living wage, and this living wage would be used to adjust the salaries of all public sector workers, right? So if the union and our party, determined that a living wage for Guyanese would be, let's say, $150,000, public sector workers, right, from the lowest paid public sector workers from the lowest paid public servant up to the ministers, they would have their salaries all adjusted by this $150,000. But the increase would be phased in so as not to upset the economy.
Phased in over
financially.
what period?
Well, you see, this is it. We would need to.
But you're the
determine-
economist.
Yeah, well, you see, let me put it to you this clearly, right? We would need to determine the quantum of the living wage. This is just a ballpark figure I just gave you. The union and us would determine the quantum for the living wage, and we would consult with the Bank of Ghana to determine what is an appropriate program, right, for releasing for paying workers their due salaries, right? But what I can say is, off the cuff, right, the initial amount would be very substantial because this will be given after maybe a 3 to 6 month warning or a 3 to 6 month notification to the public sector. I'm sorry, to the private sector, so that they will have time to adjust their inventories to accommodate any increased demand that will result from the higher wage.
Earlier you said that you will slash is my word, you will reduce the tax rates of telephone companies, telecommunication companies, commercial companies.
Yeah.
You will also reverse the VAT
Yeah.
changes made recently.
Yeah.
I don't want to put you in a spot
Please
here.
please do.
Well, what is that likely to cost?
What is likely to cost?
Yes.
Let me put it to you this way. The VAT, the implementation of VAT on basic items, right, have cost the coalition a lot of support, and it has cost Guyanese, especially the lower salaried individuals.
Well, my question to you,
what it will cost the government.
What it will cost the budget.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. The budget ran comfortably without the increases in VAT. That's
Not
one.
quite. We have a big deficit. But
No, well, you see, the deficit is a matter of policy. Right?
No, but-
I want to point out to you, right, that from 2008 to 2018 to 2017, the current expenditure, right, of our government, of our budget, increased by $101 billion.
Mhm.
No, that's $101 billion over about 10 years.
Yeah,
Okay?
but
now
you
let's
know,
put this in the context.
okay.
What we do have is experience of much corruption and overpricing of contracts in the procurement process.
But listen,
What I'd like to tell you.
listen, Clive Thomas made those same allegations.
Yeah.
Now, this government, I don't think he would accuse this government. He talked about tens of billions, even higher than tens of billions
Yeah.
of dollars. We can't find them. Now, the point is this, though, Mr. Sylvester. You want to give people a better life. That's going to cost money.
And I'm getting to it.
At the same time, you want to reduce taxation. But you have a big deficit. You're an economist.
I highly suspect that there is
Uh-huh.
a lot of corruption as it relates to the issuance of contracts. And I think, honestly, that we need to seriously examine the reason for this $101 billion increase in growth over the years, because I highly suspect that we are spending unnecessarily. It is very possible and it's very likely that there was indeed a demand for these services.
But you accept,
Right.
and we got to push on. You accept one of the largest costs in the national budget is public sector wages and salaries and pension payments.
That
If you want to significantly increase that, what are you doing to your deficit? You already have a deficit.
No. It's all about getting money into the system. You can either spend money on public servants,
Mm-hmm.
or you can buy all of the materials that is available and services for government.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I am suggesting that we start paying more attention to our workers. Examine seriously where we can cut our current expenditure, right, and better manage our capital projects to minimize our wastage of funds, because I'm certain that we're losing billions of dollars annually.
Let's go to a couple of
Yes.
other points. We dealt with taxation already. Investment, job creation, general private sector matters. You speak the first two words on the item 3. Foreign investors have the potential to significantly accelerate. Look, you know that foreign investors are as footloose as they come.
You know,
If things don't go well with them, they walk. Now, of course, if they've got big capital investment, it's not that easy. what is in your brochure, in this policy statement, that seeks to encourage the domestic private sector?
Oh. Well, you see, what we have right now is an issue of confidence in government. Our government, the government of the DNC, will instill confidence in the private sector, right? The private sector needs that. And
But
they
that's
will
not
get
what
that.
that's not
They
what
will-
you that's not
they
what
will-
you say
They
here.
will get that. They will get that through the dialogue that we will create with them.
No, but that's not what you say here.
Well, I'm telling you that that is what is needed, and that is what they will be given. They will be given confidence in us, because we will be addressing their concerns, from energy to other issues as it relates to government services, because that has been a major problem. 2 minutes.
You say here, also to be covered here is infrastructural development. What are we talking about?
Well, the development of our infrastructure, we will work with the private sector to define what is needed to push our country forward, because the proposals of the Democratic National Congress as it relates to infrastructure will be guided by the need to generate foreign currency and exports. So a lot of our infrastructure will be geared towards facilitating productive activities and exports.
And you think that that's going to generate the foreign exchange
The much needed
and the revenue for this infrastructural development?
Well, that's exactly it. That is part of the plan, right? Our workers need to feel secure. Our workers need to be de-stressed, right? Our private sector needs to be invigorated. We need to encourage foreign investment, and with our foreign investment or private sector kicking off with investment, right? We will be firing on all cylinders, proverbially, right? Because we will be engaging in a lot of economic activity which will be involve employment. We will be generating exports, which will fund our international reserves and stabilize our currency, right? That income will be a source of income and welfare growth for our public servants, and also the workers in the private sector.
I am sorry, we got to close now. I want to give you, I think we've got a minute left.
Yeah.
I want to give you that minute to make an appeal, to make a pitch to the audience out there. Whatever you want, make sure it's reasonable. Keep it legal. That's all I ask.
Yeah, well, I would only encourage Guyanese to examine our proposals seriously, right? Look at what we have to offer. We are confident that this is what you want, and this is what you would ask for in your government. I am particularly interested that the traditional PPP supporters take cognizance of what I'm saying and pay attention, because as I said before, right, Guyana cannot move forward without your support of our party. I think that's it.
Mr. Kirk Sylvester, party leader and presidential candidate, Democratic National Congress. Thank you very much for appearing on Plain Talk, and once again, congratulations on your courage, and I want to wish you the very best, because I know your heart is in the right place, your heart is in Guyana. So thank you. Operators and viewers, thank you, good night, and I'll see you next week.